On today's show, the Colorado Avalanche had huge nights from their two big stars up front, beating the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll hear from Locked On Avalanche host. We'll also hear from Locked On Predators on Andrew Brunette as the Preds continue to slide. Is he on the hot seat? And Thatcher Demko makes his season debut for the Vancouver Canucks. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this Wednesday, December 11th edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day. I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me 5 days a week over at Locked On Ottawa Senators. Today I'm with Gil Martin from Locked On New York Islanders. And no, Gil, we will not talk about Sunday's game. But we will tell you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get started with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet hits. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. What a night for the Stars in the National Hockey League. In the Edmonton-Tampa game, you had a goal from McDavid, you had a goal from Draisaitl, but nothing more impressive than the Colorado Avalanche in their 6-2 win over the Pittsburgh Penguins. We always have the matchup of the Nova Scotian superstar, Sidney Crosby against Nathan MacKinnon, and count this one for a win for MacKinnon.
Unbelievable performance by Nathan MacKinnon. I mean, a 5-point night, a goal and 4 assists, a +4, and just a great game for the Colorado Avalanche, winning by a final score of 6-2.
And we're going to hear now from the host of the Locked On Avalanche podcast, Kyle Sullivan, and we'll break down what he thinks about this performance afterwards.
The Colorado Avalanche defeat the Pittsburgh Penguins 6-2 in Pittsburgh. This caps off a 5-game road trip where the Avalanche were 4-1 on the road. Mikko Rantanen seals the deal with a hat trick of his own, his third of the year. Scott Wedgwood, brand new goalie for the Avalanche, had a 24-save night. We're going to talk about the new goalies that have joined the Avalanche on this road trip, where the Avalanche are going in the Central, and the rest of the season on your latest episode of Locked On Avalanche.
All right, thanks, Kyle. Appreciate the background info there, and I want to pick up on the goaltending, but first, Mikko Rantanen, he touched on it, 3 hat-tricks this year. That's the most in the National Hockey League this season, and it must be fun being an Avalanche fan, Gil. I know that the standings haven't exactly worked out, but they addressed their biggest need, which was between the pipes.
Yeah, they did. And, it was clear that they needed a change there. And the fact that the, team is being proactive and getting out ahead of things, I think that's really smart. We're way before the trade deadline right now. You have time to get the goalie to integrate with the team, be familiar. And in the second half of the season, hopefully you improve that area and you're clicking on all cylinders.
Oh, and if you're looking at Colorado now, they're in the first wildcard spot in the Western Conference after their win. They've won 3 in a row. And Scott Wedgwood, really a desperation pickup, I'll call it. They made a more calculated move with Mackenzie Blackwood, who is dealing with a bit of a flu, but will join the team shortly. It was Scott Wedgwood, though, who's really carried them since joining the team, and he helped them get that win over Pittsburgh last night. Since joining Colorado, Wedgwood's played 4 games. He's 3-1 with a .944 save percentage and 2 quality starts in there, 1 shutout. So the Avalanche, we know offensively they've got a ton of talent, but the fact that they're now figuring out how to play on the back end and get some saves, most importantly, they're going to be a scary team here, and one that if I'm a team ahead of them in the standings right now, most notably the Dallas Stars, who have a bit stagnated now. They're 6-4 in their last 10, tied in points, although the Stars do have 3 games in hand. I'd be looking hot on my tail for an Avalanche warning to come. So we're looking into that, and you got any more takes on that game?
Yeah, I mean, if you think back to the slow start that the Avalanche got off to this season, the fact that they have climbed back to where they are right now with the arrow pointing up, if I'm ahead of them in the standings, I'm looking in the rearview mirror.
Yes, you are. And we got more from Locked On Avalanche wherever you get your podcasts. We do have local experts on the biggest stories 5 days a week here on Locked On NHL all across the channel. So make sure to subscribe to your favorite shows across the network. One other game I want to touch on last night. We were talking about this before we were recording. Another Central Division team, the Winnipeg Jets, had been struggling. Losers of 5 of 8 going into last night's game. And the big bad Boston Bruins, who were 7-2 under new coach Joe Sacco, they'd won 4 in a row. They come into Winnipeg and completely unravel in the third period. The Jets scored 5 of their 8, count them, 8 goals in the third period. They win 8-1. Is this something where this is just the Jets kind of getting back on track, or do you worry that this type of loss can undo some of the good work that the Boston Bruins have put in under their new head coach?
Well, I think this is sort of the test for the new coaching staff. I mean, you knew they weren't going to sustain the high level of play. You get that immediate boost from a coaching change, and then it sort of wears off, and you usually go back to the mean. So, they got the boost, and now it's a question of stabilizing things. Can you say to guys, hey, we had a bad night. It happens. There's 82 games. Keep doing what you usually do, and we'll go get them. Or is the sky falling because you gave up 5 goals in the third period? Here's where we find out what the coaching staff can do.
And for Winnipeg, they're just hoping this gets them back on track, because after the hottest start in NHL history, they have really regressed. But there's so much talent there. They'll figure it out here. Eventually, they are still leading the way with 21 now. 21 wins this season. That's the most of any team in the NHL. Minnesota, Washington, each with 19. However, of course, not everybody's played the exact same amount of games. Minnesota with 2 games in hand and Washington with 3. Lots of great stories across the NHL to get to here on Locked On NHL. However, we've got more to come right now, with the Nashville Predators being one of the stories for the other reason this year. They just cannot seem to buy a win. Last night looked like they could maybe get out of their funk. They were leading multiple times against the Calgary Flames, but instead their winless streak drops to 8. The Predators are 0-5-3, and we'll hear from Ann Kimmel about what that could mean for their head coach. That's next. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. And right now on FanDuel, new customers who bet $5 will win $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet hits. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and NHL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page that you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's over with our friends at FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, local experts on the biggest stories. Thank you for making us your first listen today. I'm Ross Levitan from Locked On Senators. That's Gil Martin from Locked On New York Islanders. And your Islanders, man, right back in the loss column. They've been surging before that, but the LA Kings get a 3-1 win. Gil, what was your take on that performance?
This performance didn't bother me that much. I mean, the Islanders had a bad first period, but they were able to come back, pulled it within 1 goal. I think for the last 2 periods of the game, they were pretty even with the Kings. The Islanders just can't finish, and it's been a problem all year. Yeah, there's no Matthew Barzal and no Anthony Duclair. They're still out with injuries. But even when those guys were healthy, the Islanders had trouble finishing. They are 31st, I believe, in the league in shooting percentage with about 9.1% for the year. That's not going to get it done over the long haul. But the way the Islanders played, more sound defensively, more structured for the last 2 periods, I almost think this is a loss they could build on, especially when you consider the Kings have won 6 straight.
The Kings, just defensive masterclass. You said it's been 6 games, right, since they've allowed more than a goal or 2?
More than 2, yeah.
That's super impressive, and they're doing it without their stalwart on the back end in Drew Doughty, but other guys stepping up in different circumstances. Are you worried about riding Ilya Sorokin a little much? I was surprised on Sunday the Sens and Islanders played second half of back-to-back for both teams, but the Islanders went right back to Sorokin for a second straight performance. He played last night against the LA Kings as well. He started 20 games already this season. Is that something where until Varlamov's back, you're okay and the fan base understands that the best opportunity to win is to just ride the hot hand?
You know, it's a mixed bag. And the backup right now is ex-Ottawa Senator Marcus Hogberg. And he's the backup. They brought him up from Bridgeport in the AHL. He played one period, I believe it was 2-3 games ago. He didn't give up a goal. He stopped all 11 shots, but it doesn't seem like they're eager to start him in a game. Yes, I am concerned about riding Sorokin too much. You know, he's coming off back surgery during the offseason. You don't want to burn him out in December and have him tired come, February, March, and hopefully April, where you still need him to win some hockey games.
Hey, we were hoping to see Marcus Hogberg, not only because Ilya Sorokin is such a superstar in the league, but Hogberg was a Senators draft pick and came up through the organization. But I think it was the right choice. And Senators fans looked at it from the other side saying, Anton Forsberg made 9 saves in that game. Maybe they could have used Linus Ullmark in that one. He'll be in net tonight when the Sens take on the Anaheim Ducks. Now back to the Nashville Predators. We talk about how stout defensively the LA Kings have been. Well, offensively, the Predators have basically been putting up similar stats per game. They scored more than 2 goals in a game for the first time in 8 performances last night, but it still wasn't enough as they lose 4-3 to the Calgary Flames. And Kimmel here to break down the loss.
The Nashville Predators lost their game against the Calgary Flames last night by a score of 4-3. That ties a franchise record for 8 consecutive losses in a row. Is Andrew Brunette going to lose his job? That's been the hot topic here in Nashville. And according to an interview that general manager Barry Trotz gave last night before the loss to the Calgary Flames, Andrew Brunette is not going to go anywhere. Barry Trotz reiterated his support for the coach. He did apologize for the team not meeting expectations and has said that this has been very disappointing. But he believes in Andrew Brunette's coach. As a coach, he believes in his system. And he also believes in developing young coaches like this league has to develop young players. And so it appears, at least for now, that Andrew Brunette's job is secure. Earlier, Barry Trotz did give a Christmas deadline for this team to turn some things around before he made some decisions. Those decisions, most likely to add some youth to the lineup, not likely that players will be moved. And again, according to Barry Trotz, it sounds like Andrew Brunette still going to be the head coach of a very underperforming Nashville Predators team.
Thanks, Ann. Appreciate the breakdown there. And Andrew Brunette certainly he can do things strategically, but he can't put the puck in the net himself. You look at their top performers, and it just has not been good enough so far this season. I know Jonathan Marchessault had 2 goals last night. He needed that. He was at 5 going into that game. Steven Stamkos, only 1 even strength goal so far this season. He's got 6 on the power play. The big ticket free agents that came in need to be better if he's going to get back on track as an organization here, because they're still getting great goaltending from UC Saros. Ottawa had Nashville on Saturday. That could have been a 6 or 7-2 victory, or 1, I guess. Nashville only scored 1 goal in that game, but he can't do it himself back there. So I'm really curious, because that's the disappointment of the season. I don't know if they got a plan and then cancel a U2 tour. I know it worked last year. They went on that absolute heater. But Gil, like, how can you try to explain the lack of productivity from this Predators team?
Yeah, it's tough. They brought in so many big names. You know, Barry Trotz had a very active offseason. He's the guy who sort of won the headline battle over the offseason. But the offseason headlines and big free agent signings don't always equal W's in the standings once the season gets underway. And you sort of knew this team, because of all the new players and the new chemistry, it would take them a little bit of time to mesh, that maybe they would get off to a little bit of a slow start, but I don't think anybody expected an 8-game losing streak. and for the team to be tied right now for the worst record in the NHL. In fact, they've played one more game than Chicago, so they do right now have the worst record in the NHL. I don't think anybody expected it to be this bad, especially offensively.
No, and we'll see what happens next with the Predators. We know that their superstar defenseman, Roman Josi, left last night's game with an injury. That has to be the only thing worse than the performance that they've shown over the last 8 games. In New Jersey last night, it was Sheldon Keefe against his former team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. And if you look at the shot totals, you look at the expected goals, you look at the chances, a dominant performance from his team. But the Toronto Maple Leafs come up clutch. They get a shorthanded goal in the third period. Then Austin Matthews scores the OT winner. The Toronto Maple Leafs, and they've got a ton of offensive talent, but it's been their goaltending, most notably off-season pickup Anthony Stolarz, who has just been fantastic so far this year. A sparkling .928 save percentage in 16 starts. He's 9-5-2, and last night was spectacular with a 38 save performance. It seems like that's the type of recipe where if you're not scoring a whole lot of goals, at least you're keeping them out at the other end.
Yeah, and who had Anthony Stolarz as being the big star for the Leafs on their bingo card before the season started? I don't know how many people did. Had to be such a frustrating loss for the Devils. You outshoot your opponent 39-16 and end up losing in overtime. Jacob Markstrom just had no margin for error in that game.
No margin for error. And he played decent, but couldn't get it done. And the Toronto Maple Leafs get back to their winning ways. They are, at last check, second in the Atlantic Division and fifth rather. Oh my goodness. The Metropolitan teams just keep winning here, but
Yep.
Fifth in the Eastern Conference. This Eastern Conference, I actually want to touch on that real quick because we haven't mentioned the Philadelphia Flyers. One of the good stories this season. They get another win last night, although the score probably not as indicative of the performance. They win 5-3 over the Columbus Blue Jackets. They've won 5. They've got points in 7 of their last 10, and they're sitting now in that wild card position, although, again, have played 29 games versus Tampa, who they're tied with, has only played 26. Matvei Michkov continues to dazzle. The sparkling rookie kind of really taking it by the horns. I know Macklin Celebrini's having a great year too, but Matvei Michkov coming over from Russia and really fitting in well with the Flyers.
Yeah, he had a pair of assists in last night's game. And, the Flyers quietly picking up points. And the amazing thing right now in the Metro, you go on a 2-game winning streak, you can go from 8th place to 4th place just at the snap of a finger. It's that tight and that bunched up.
Well, the whole Atlantic Division, from both wildcard teams to dead last, is separated by 5 points right now. The Montreal Canadiens sitting in last, but they're feeling good about their games right now too, because they've got Patrick Laine back, and he's putting the puck in the net. He's got 3 goals in 4 games since returning from a preseason injury that many fans thought could have knocked him out of the whole year. Instead, chooses the rehab route and is able to get back on track. So one of the other great stories for a guy who has not been able to stay healthy for the last couple of years in Columbus. Columbus, too, great story. I know they fell last night to the Philadelphia Flyers, but they've overperformed this season as well. They sit at 27 points in 28 games. Okay, let's get to another fun story around the NHL. Coming up, the San Jose Sharks. Sure, they lost 3-2. Sure, they gave up 2 goals in the last 6 minutes to go from leading to a regulation loss. Yeah, defensemen scored both those goals, including San Jose Sharks legend Brent Burns, who scored against his former team. But the mood is still high. JD Young will be by to explain after a quick word. You're listening to Locked On NHL, your team every day.
Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. If you love sports, you're going to love Prize Picks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the action. Here's why you need to get started today. You can win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks and get $50 instantly when you place your first $5 lineup. No need to win. The $50 is guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers fun weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where select player projections are discounted up to 25%. This week on Prize Picks, I'm eyeing the hockey board. Jack Hughes for more than 4 shots on goal, or Tammy Panarin for more than 1 assist. It's so simple to make my picks and have fun with friends while potentially cashing out fast. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you place your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly. Prize Picks, run your game.
Welcome back, Locked On NHL, your team every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we have local experts on the biggest stories. Now, after a slight surge, the San Jose Sharks have lost 3 in a row, but don't let that get in the way of a good time. Here's Locked On Sharks host, JD Young.
The San Jose Sharks can't hold on in Raleigh. I'm JD Young of Locked On Sharks. And these Sharks hold a 2-1 lead going into the third period, but they've continued to prove that they're a 40-minute team. They give you a good 40 minutes, but those last 20 minutes strike as the Hurricanes put on 2 goals to beat the Sharks 3-2. Luke Cunnin has 2 goals, and Vitek Vanacek with the starters net all his. Performs admirably tonight, but the Sharks cannot find an answer for the Canes in the third period, and we're just bullied by the Hurricanes as the Sharks only got 3 shots on goal before the final scramble with the extra attacker. So we'll discuss more on this game, talk about Shakir Mukhamadulin's call-up as the Sharks continue to adjust their roster on your next episode of Locked On Sharks, wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well.
There's JD Young, one of the hardest workers here at the Locked On Podcast Network. You hear him every Tuesday on Locked On NHL as well. They're a fun team to watch, though, Gil. I will say the San Jose Sharks, Ottawa played them a couple weeks ago, and you just marvel at the young talent, and you can see that as hard as the rebuild has been, and then you look at as well kind of, stalling that with maybe making a few trades where the year they tanked, they gave up that first-round pick in the Erik Karlsson trade. That ends up being Tim Stützle, but they've got some young, exciting players coming up. This Macklin Celebrini, unbelievable talent. William Eklund, now 3 years after his draft, has really caught fire. And Fabian Zetterlund, a part of the return from Timo Meyer's trade to the New Jersey Devils, fitting in seamlessly as a top-line forward over there. So a couple more months maybe of pain for the Sharks, but long-term, they're set up for success.
Yeah, and I think fans are starting to realize that even if this team is not going to win consistently yet, that they're still in the rebuild. There's been some progress in San Jose, and they're entertaining. I mean, every game you can pull a couple of moves and plays that Macklin Celebrini makes and just be in awe of the fact that this kid is still only 18 years old. And look at what he's doing. Imagine what he'll do in a year or 2 or 3 when he is more confident, more comfortable, more adjusted to the NHL game, and matures more physically. So great to see that there is hope in San Jose. And I really think that JD has the right attitude. Yeah, we lost our 3rd game in a row, but progress is being made, and there are things to look forward to in San Jose.
There certainly are, and you can add the young, exciting Yaroslav Askarov as a part of that. They just move on from Scott Wedgwood now, that's the other Wood they got. Mackenzie Blackwood to Colorado as well from San Jose, and they're still stocking picks there. They've got a lot of assets coming that haven't even made the National Hockey League. We didn't even touch on Will Smith, who, again, is taking a little time to adjust the NHL, but he'll get there. Back to last night's slate. We briefly mentioned it, but what a game it was. For a 2-1 game between the NHL, 2 of their highest scoring teams, the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Edmonton Oilers. It went right down to the wire with 8 seconds left. The Tampa Bay Lightning thought they tied this game, but Nick Paul had hit the puck with a high stick before it allegedly crossed the line, because you saw in the replay, you could never clearly see the puck over the line. However, if you use the physics of it, it would be very improbable for it to have not have. Now, the Lightning were arguing that because he hit it down with a high stick, it then hit off of Darnell Nurse, which would negate the high stick, but that didn't happen, and the home team wins 2-1, and their stars came to play as well. Did you see Connor McDavid's goal? I mean, for him, it's just another goal. For anyone else, that's the highlight of their career.
Yeah, I mean, he just makes incredible play after incredible play. And, he's considered the best in the world for a reason, and he shows it game in and game out. And then, in the same game, Leon Draisaitl, the first player to 20 goals this year. Edmonton just has so many elite weapons on this team. And again, just if you want to see entertaining hockey, you could turn on the Edmonton Oilers anytime.
You can also turn on the Minnesota Wild, who get a 5-4 shootout win over the Utah Hockey Club. They tie it late in this game with just a little time left, 44 seconds to be exact. Marco Rossi with his 10th of the year, another young player who really had a tough time because of long COVID, missed almost a full year, but he's back now. He looks great. They tie it, and who else? Matt Boldy in the shootout does a great job beating the goaltender. Now, all that to say, you still look at the Minnesota Wild, and for me, all focus has to be on Kirill Kaprizov. To me, the leading MVP candidate. I think our friends at FanDuel agree. I'll pull up those numbers in a moment, but to find his overall stats numbers, all you have to do is go to the NHL's league leaders. He's second behind Nathan MacKinnon. Of course, that 5-point night for MacKinnon helped vault him ahead of Kaprizov, but Kaprizov, to me, the most outstanding fact about him this year is his average time on ice. He's averaging 22 and a half minutes as a winger. Gil, is this sustainable for the young Russian forward?
Well, we're going to find out, aren't we? Because they are riding him. And the amazing thing about Kaprizov, there is no player on the Minnesota Wild that is within 15 points of his point total. The next highest is Matt Boldy, who is 15 points behind him. So Kaprizov just really 18 goals, 43 points in just 27 games. He has been outstanding. He's dangerous on the power play. He's dangerous 5-on-5. Just outstanding play this year. He has taken his game to another level, and he was already outstanding before this season.
Such a star. And the big thing in Minnesota is, how do we get this guy locked up after this season? He'll be able to start negotiating his next contract. And I think the part of this too is where Minnesota's had the cap hell over the last, 5-6 years, ever since they bought out Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. That money is going to come off the books. It's open check for Kirill Kaprizov to stay in Minnesota. And I hope he does, because that's a great state for hockey. And I love when the Minnesota Wild and that building gets rocking. The XL Energy Center is so much fun. I got to see a game there last year. It is an absolute blast of a place when that team is doing well. All right, Gil, couple more stories to get to, including Thatcher Demko making his season debut. This was an important one for the Vancouver Canucks. They lose in overtime 4-3. But if you're a Canucks fan, all you wanted to see was Thatcher Demko looking comfortable in goal. He allowed 4 goals on 25 shots. It wasn't perfect, but it is something that you can build on for a team that's been without JT Miller. He's back practicing with the team after a leave of absence. So to me, this, even though it's a loss, you get a point out of it, and you can build some internal growth with the players who are going to be big parts of this team going forward.
Yeah, and you had to expect some rust. I mean, he's making his season debut in, here we are, the middle part of December. So you had to figure Thatcher Demko would not be as sharp as he's going to get. And the fact that he went out there, played, did not appear to be in any discomfort or pain or limited range of motion. Yeah, he was a little rusty, but you take this, you build on it. He's got to get over these hurdles. And it's a very positive first step for the Vancouver Canucks in their quest to get healthy and then to get back to that high level of play we've seen from them the last few years.
Shout out to Robert Thomas, who had a fantastic game. He had 2 assists, added a shorthanded goal as well. He missed a lot of time this year, and the NHL is a better place when Robert Thomas is there. He was a guy who, going into the year, I thought could have had a chance to make Team Canada at the upcoming Four Nations face-off, but obviously missing that time cost him potentially a spot on the team. But as they said last night during the broadcast, and you never want to see injuries, but if there is an opportunity for Team Canada to make a change and add a player, he might be top of the list the way he's performed since coming back off the injured list. All right, let's take a quick look at tonight's games. Ottawa playing Anaheim. You can check out Locked On Senators for a full game day preview. I want to focus on the other game, Buffalo hosting the New York Rangers, despite still being in a playoff spot. Well, 1 point out, actually, now that they were jumped last night in the standings by the Philadelphia Flyers. The New York Rangers are seemingly in free fall mode. What's your take on what's going on? I know you're in the New York area. What's the vibe around the Rangers, Gil?
There's just a lot of negativity right now. I mean, they trade their captain, hoping to clean out the atmosphere in the locker room and get everybody on the same page. You know, right now, this is a team that is less than the sum of its parts, that doesn't seem to be playing to its potential and can't seem to find its identity. This is a team that is built on goaltending. You just signed Igor Shesterkin to that monster extension. It's going to be up to Shesterkin, I think, to help get this team out of this slump because, they need him to lead. And I think just getting their confidence back, getting a couple of wins under their belt. If he has to steal a game or two, I think that could jumpstart this New York Rangers team. And someone's got to win. Buffalo has lost, 7 in a row?
They're 0-4-3 in their last 7.
Yeah.
Well, I got a message to Rangers fans. Keep our captain's name out of your dirty mouths, as Brady Tkachuk is not going anywhere. I know Larry Brooks set off a firestorm last Friday saying that the Rangers' primary trade target is Brady Tkachuk. But guess what? He ain't for sale, so keep that to yourselves. All right. That's me having to express myself of the mentions over the weekend on Twitter at Send Central was just a complete gong show. And Steve Staios and Michael Andlauer, even the owner of the Ottawa Senators, coming out and saying this is a complete disaster. Called it, quote, soft tampering, whatever that is. I think for him, it's just protecting his team. Brady Tkachuk just had his firstborn in September, and he feels like, look, there should be absolutely no trade speculation around the captain who wants to be a part of the solution in Ottawa. And saw a fantastic tweet today just while we're chatting about Brady Tkachuk. This season, he's got 13 goals, 29 points, and 106 hits. He's the only player in the National Hockey League with more than 25 points and 100 hits or more. He is a unicorn in the true sense of the word. But as I said on Locked On Senators, Gil, the best way to stop trade rumors is to win hockey games, and it all goes away.
Yeah, well, or at least you get different trade rumors. Who are you going to add, right?
Wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't that be fun? Can't relate to that in particular, but that should be a good game in Buffalo. I mean, basically, whoever loses this team, their fan base is going to go into full panic mode because Buffalo was sitting in a playoff spot like 2 weeks ago. They were the upstart team. We always talk about that trio, Ottawa, Detroit, Buffalo. Who's ever going to take the next step? And people were pointing at Buffalo saying, look, I think they'd won 4 games in a row. They were surging. They looked good. Tage Thompson had been out of the lineup for that as well, Gil. But now it is, again, a long time since their last win in Buffalo. We'll chat about that more on tomorrow's Locked On NHL. And for more on the New York Islanders, check out Gil Martin on Locked On New York Islanders. You can find me at Locked On Ottawa Senators. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Shout out to FanDuel and Prize Picks for being sponsors of the show. Support us by supporting our great sponsors. And make sure to check out another Locked On show for your second listen, like the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. For today, we say goodbye. For Gil Martin, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On NHL Podcast. Your team every day.